Welcome back. Thank you for joining us for for potentially our last episode ever of a peptide feeling.
We
This
say potentially. Okay, you're leaving.
potentially.
I feel like you're leaving the door ajar.
So as you guys no doubt know, we've done, I don't know, what, 7 episodes, give or take, on peptides now. And this is
I think it actually
potentially.
might be a little bit more than that. Yeah.
Is it?
So
I just
yeah,
pulled that number out of nowhere. I have no
I
idea.
think yeah.
But this is potentially the last one for a while because I think we've covered most peptides.
I
And
believe so.
in fact, this is not even really a peptide episode. I don't think we're going to talk
Not
about any
really.
peptides
Okay,
today.
because we're gonna. Yeah, I mean, actually, like two of the major compounds that we're going to be talking about. Okay, I mean, some people might perceive that they're peptides, okay, but
Yeah.
what they come under the category of like small molecule compounds.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
but
not technically a peptide, but
yeah,
they're probably sold on peptide websites. So
yes,
if
that
that counts.
we'll put they're like they're like the what's the but like I think I said to you, okay, this is sort of like the leftovers uh,
These are
peptide
the
podcast.
swapping seconds compounds that haven't made it in any of our other episodes.
It's like the dog's breakfast of leftover, peptides or small molecule compounds. This is the podcast for you.
These are
If
these
you,
are the leftovers. But these are the leftovers particularly for body composition.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
I think our last episode was on GLP-1s, and we realized there were other fat loss, other body compounds that didn't fit within that episode. And so we wanted to touch on some of those today. And I did a webinar today, and we were talking about some of these compounds, talking about GLP-1s, and it was with a whole stack of coaches who are, upskilling. And the point I made with those coaches was traditionally our bread and butter as coaches and as PTs has been fat loss clients. And,
mm,
10 years ago, if you were good at fat loss, if you were good at achieving a transformation with your clients, like that was it. That was what made you a good coach. And people, I remember traveling all over the country to go learn these methods from coaches who were good at getting fat loss. And the reality is everything that they taught doesn't doesn't stack up, doesn't hold a candle to what GLP-1s can do. And so our job as coaches will rapidly shift. And I was telling you before we hit record, they're forecasting, I think Goldman and Sachs forecasted 1 in 8 adults will be using a GLP-1 by 2030. But they're saying that if oral availability becomes a thing, then that could be as many as 1/3 of adults might be using GLP-1s within a handful of years. And so I do think that as coaches, as PTs, as, whatever you are, if you're working in this industry, we need to learn how to service these clients who are using these compounds. But there might be clients who don't want to use them and maybe are willing or wanting or have a desire to use other compounds. Maybe other compounds might meet additional needs. Maybe they don't want to use anything, and that's okay as well. But we're going to cover some of these additional compounds that maybe have a niche application in some cases.
yeah. I think it would be like we by no means are we saying that these compounds that we're going to be chatting about in this podcast are going to deliver the same outcomes as we spoke about with the glucagon-like peptide 1 receptor
Exactly.
agonist. Okay.
Exactly.
We're not saying that. Okay. Like it's not, there's going to be a pretty wide gap there. Okay. We would say to, reduction in, body weight and, even, I mean, if you use the measurement of like, body mass index, okay, or body fat percentage, whatever that might be, we're not saying that it's going to be anywhere near in that realms. But, okay, what we would say if people had some other health ailments or other complications that are taking place, maybe some of the compounds that we're going to mention in this episode, they will cover some of those bases. So then it could be it could be a potential option.
Yeah. So let's start there because you said, hey, these won't necessarily produce the same result. And I think that's really interesting. So I want to start with tesofensine. And tesofensine is a compound that I started playing around with before I started using GLP-1s with clients. And again, I don't know if I can say that. If the TGA are listening, I don't use GLP-1s ever. But tesofensine is really interesting because at the time that it was being studied, it was one of the most, in fact, it may have even been the most promising weight loss drug that was
Yeah.
being studied. And, they were seeing 10% weight loss in about 10%, give or take, I think that was in 24 weeks. So that's pretty significant, right? 10% weight loss in 24 weeks, obviously in obese individuals. Now,
And we
what I
should
think is,
say, like, I don't know if you did mention, sorry to cut you off, okay, but I just want to I sort of want to reiterate this to people listening, yeah, okay, is that it it doesn't come under the category as a peptide, okay, and so it would be a small molecule compound. I think it comes under the phenyltropane family, okay, so it's, and that was, if you look at a lot of the research, okay, it's sort of like being labeled as a sort of like anti-obesity drug or compound. Yeah, okay,
yeah,
basically.
yeah,
Sorry to interrupt, okay, but I just want to make it. I want to make sure that people understand. Okay, it's
yeah,
not, doesn't come
not
under
a
the
peptide.
category as a peptide. Yeah.
Yeah. So tesofensine, 10% weight loss in 24 weeks, which again, you look at that at the time, that was phenomenal, unbelievable. Like, can you believe we've got a compound that's doing this? And then in no time, we have GLP-1s hit the market, GLP-2s, and then obviously Retta, which is almost, going to be released soon. And they just blow tesofensine out of the water. Retta, what are they reporting? 24, 25, 28% weight loss. I mean, I think that's over a slightly longer timeline, but just blowing tesofensine's 10% out of the water. So I don't think, like, it's almost unlucky when
Oh,
tesofensine was
if yeah, I mean, you feel like it's probably just gonna fall by the wayside a little bit.
absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely. But had
yeah,
it been 5 years earlier, I think tesofensine would have just taken off, right?
because like just on that, just obviously for the people that are listening, yeah, okay, that um, it's obviously like mechanism wise. It's a what they call it, like a triple monoamine reuptake inhibitor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
So
that's serotonin, noradrenaline,
yeah,
dopamine
yeah,
reuptake.
dopamine, serotonin, noradrenaline. Okay, so that would be the triple reuptake inhibitor. Yeah. And is
Just
it
quickly,
like
Dave, so really important, if anyone's using any medication that influences serotonin, this is a
yes,
no-no. So
yeah,
SSRIs, no, you're not going to touch tesofensine.
yeah, because it comes under the category of like SNDRI or something like that. Yeah. So, but the like from my understanding, because I just want to make it clear, okay, I haven't used tesofensine, but we'll get into your experience with using it, okay? Because I definitely remember that, yeah, okay. And I think
Well, my
that's a
second experience was better than my first one, so
yeah, well, that's for sure. But I remember talking to you during the first experience, okay, and I think the conversation was taking place with you pretty much like in the shower, yeah, okay. So
probably sitting in a ball, rocking
uh,
back and forth in my shower.
yeah, but like, have you, because like with tesofensine, okay, like is a lot of that stuff, do you think is sort of like based on, have you ever seen the stuff where they did research around like 5-HTP? Like,
For appetite suppression or
yeah, yeah, yeah. So 5-hydroxy L-tryptophan, okay, like obviously
yeah.
you got, L-tryptophan that gets converted to 5-HTP, 5-HTP to serotonin,
Yeah.
serotonin melatonin, yeah, okay. But they were looking at the, so like obviously that's obviously one of the mechanisms, okay, that tesofensine would be working around, okay. But they actually showed there was prolonged weight loss by 5-HTP, okay, obviously serotonin precursor, okay, and yes, okay, it was around like appetite, suppression. Okay, so it had appetite suppressant effects. Okay, and then they also showed it was pretty effective in treating like obesity. Okay, but I mean I can't remember, to what degree, okay, like percentages, okay. But the interesting thing I found around the 5-HTP, okay, was it sort of blocked the body weight rebound that occurs after the weight loss, which actually
Mm.
I found that relatively like
So even when they
interest.
stopped taking the 5-HTP, or do you mean if they added that after dieting phase?
I think, well, that's a very good call. You're pushing me on that, yeah, okay. But I mean, Well, I mean, I would have to check the research. Yeah,
Sure.
okay, but yeah.
It's
Um,
been years since I used to use 5-HTP occasionally in clients who couldn't control their appetite. I don't know how much it really did, but it was based on
mm,
some of those studies. But that's the idea here with the tesofensine.
yeah,
So
yeah.
the tesofensine, you've got the serotonin component, so your uptake inhibitor for the serotonin, so that's meant to lower the appetite. You've got the dopamine component, which is meant to lower the cravings, and then you've got the noradrenaline component, which is meant to increase energy expenditure. So it makes a lot of sense. Like that's great. You're less appetite, less food noise, less craving, and more energy burning. That's a pretty good combination.
Mm. Have you seen some of the stuff? Yeah, like can't remember once again. I can't remember all the ins and outs. Okay, of the research gap, but there was something around like it was in like obese subjects, but when they weren't giving more direct like dietary prescriptions, okay, like dietary recommendations, that there was some like using the 5-HTP, okay, as a sort of like weight loss aid, okay, obviously by increasing the serotonin levels, okay, they actually showed that there was issues around like eating disorders. I think it was like anorexia. Okay,
Yeah,
have you seen this stuff where they decrease
yeah.
like food intake? Okay, there was like what I'm saying. It was actually some negative stuff around like too much. Okay, like I guess like because it like obviously it promotes a feeling of fullness and curbing appetite. Okay, but maybe okay that suppression, that those suppressant effects, okay, might have been quite extreme.
Mhm. Yeah, interesting.
Mm.
Mhm. So
Anyway, it's a bit of a side note.
tesofensine,
Yeah.
what we didn't actually say is it was initially studied it wasn't studied for weight loss at all, right? So it's initially studied around Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, and they noted weight loss when they were using it in these studies, and then they took a turn. But it's interesting that it was used, and I don't recall. I don't think they noticed benefits around. Do you remember if there was actual benefits of the Alzheimer's and Parkinson's symptoms? I feel
Yeah.
like there wasn't, but
Mm.
it's been a little while since I was looking at the data. But obviously they were looking at that because of the effect around the neurotransmitters, in particular the dopamine.
Yeah.
And that's one of the, what would you say, side effects, benefits, potential uses of tesofensine. And it's why I was drawn to it initially over something like GLP-1s, because it's working just completely differently, right? So obviously the GLP-1s, we talked about that in the last episode, the main function is slowing gastric motility. And obviously there's some other stuff with, say retatrutide, but and the slowing of the gastric motility, like that's a bit of a concern. That could lead to some potential dysbiosis, maybe SIBO. Again, we're not saying everyone's going to get SIBO from using a GLP-1, but there's some concern there, concern around gallbladder function and stuff we talked about. Whereas you look at tesofensine, and I can't see anything to suggest a concern from a gut perspective. I can't see
Mm.
anything to suggest it's going to lead to SIBO. And based on working on these neurotransmitters, it should actually help from a mood perspective. So if you
Mm.
get someone, and this is where my thought was going initially when I started using it, was you get someone who maybe is a little bit more prone to some of those mood disorders. Maybe they experience more depressive symptoms, but they're not medicated. Maybe they do have a bit more addictive personality stuff going on. Tesofensine, you would think, could make a lot of sense.
Yeah, but
Now,
well, like obviously, yeah. Once again, and I know I know you've already mentioned this, guy, but just the concern, okay, around if someone was taking like SSRIs, and so just to make it clear that you will not be able to combine, okay, something like the tesofensine, okay, with if someone is on those types of medications. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, and there was
yeah.
also in one of those studies, I think it was just in the high doses at 1 milligram, but there was increase in blood pressure. I think maybe there was increase in heart rate. I think that happened across the board because of the noradrenaline, but there was some potential risk there around blood pressure. So if someone was hypertensive, you might want to be a little bit careful there as well.
Do you think that
So
would be a big concern though?
personally, I don't think so, but
Yeah.
they one of the studies made it out like it was a big concern. But if you actually look at the data, I don't think it was that compelling.
So maybe a minor consideration right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anecdotally, my experience with it, I So initially, and I don't actually think this is the tesofensine. So I got my hands on what was meant to be tesofensine. It had something else added to it as well. I think it was just albedo, which I don't know that much about or use. But the first time I used tesofensine, I actually had a mentoring client who used it, and she was like, "This was hectic. Try this." And I was like, "Okay." And my God, the like this sweats and like saliva production and just cold chills. It was it was middle of summer, and I just had to go walk into the ocean and just stand there in the ocean shivering while being excessively boiling and sweating. And then I did like after I did that for like an hour, I came home. I was just like sitting, literally wrapped up in a towel, shivering, and then ended up just like sitting on my shower floor for like 2 hours until this
Well,
passed.
I mean, yeah, I remember that, okay, because I think I actually spoke to you on the phone, okay, when you were actually doing that. So,
Oh, it was
uh,
unbelievable. And
mm.
then, so like I said, that was tesofensine
But
combined with
like,
something else.
did it actually lead to any, like, I mean, you don't think it's sort of like stuffing around with something like aldosterone or, I mean, you weren't getting things like,
I don't think so. And like, yeah, it's not like well, I
I mean,
mean,
you
I don't
weren't
know,
getting
like a
things like,
sling.
like spatial awareness issues and bumping into things and
Hard to say
lightheadedness
when you're lying in a
uh,
shower, isn't it?
and like dizzy upon standing and,
No, I don't think I had any of that.
salt
Maybe a bit of
cravings and,
nausea. I don't think I could eat. I think I was a bit nauseated. But then I used it again with a different like I secured a different product, and I didn't have any of that. I think I had maybe maybe some dry mouth or maybe some nausea. I can't fully remember now. But I've used this with a handful of clients and obviously with myself. And the experience that almost everyone has fed back to me has been very similar, which is the first day or two that they took it, they felt amazing. Like incredible. Mood, top of the world, best day ever. And then the next day or two, you still feel okay, feel a bit better than normal, but didn't quite have the same high. And then you kind of get a week in and you're like, I've kind of lost that high.
mm.
And maybe the appetite is like the appetite suppressed, don't feel like I need to eat, but it kind of diminishes. And so I found that there was very quick diminishing returns. And that's what I noted with clients as well, that they felt amazing for the first week, maybe 2 weeks, and then it just didn't feel like it was doing that much.
So you
I
did
had
actually
one
notice some of those neurological, like
absolutely,
benefits initially. Yeah.
initially, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've got one friend who cycles it, so she uses it very intermittently, and she'll just use it for like a day or 2 and then stop, and that seems to work for her. Um, but yeah, I haven't had anyone who's had, like, a great experience long term with it. I did have one client who got anxiety with it. I think that was due to having caffeine with it, so I'd
Mm.
maybe be a little bit cautious with that. So, yeah, I didn't really have clients use it long term. It was helping those clients with their appetite, but it wasn't helping long term with mood and some of those initial benefits. So, that's just, I guess, N of 5. I've used that with a handful of clients and maybe other people have had different experiences, but and it's one that I would still keep in my back pocket. And if I had a client who, for example, if I had someone who had a history of disordered eating and maybe more like binge eating disorder, they've maybe had some of those sort of, depressive symptoms, focus issues, just like, mood issues. It could be something maybe thinking about cycling, maybe doing a few. The thing is, it's got a very long half-life, right? So you need to be aware of that. Like very long. It's like a week and a half half-life.
And I guess that's what we're saying. Yeah. Okay. We're just saying like, okay, if someone's like really ticking the boxes for like all the things that you're mentioning there, okay, well, this potentially could be on your radar.
Yeah.
But it is getting a little bit more, I don't want to say specialized because it's probably not the correct like terminology.
No.
Um, but it's a case
Very
of that
niche application.
it's niche. Yeah. Okay. It's niche. Okay.
Yeah.
It is a case that you would have to be ticking like a lot of different boxes. Okay. For this to be like, okay, this is what I'm going to go for. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, especially because there are different options available now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know if you've got anything else to say about Tesofensine.
I
I think
mean,
that's
look,
pretty
look.
much.
Obviously, outside of some of the research that I have looked at. Okay, where like I think I said this to you. I actually thought that research looked pretty interesting, and
Mhm.
but because I have not seen a need to use it with any clients, thus far. Okay, I definitely have not used it on myself. Okay, I guess from an anecdotal perspective, okay, it's very hard for me to pass judgment. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I would never use it. Maybe there could be a specialized client that I do actually decide to use it with. Okay, but at the moment, it would have to be a pretty specialized specialized case for
Yeah.
me to consider it. I
Yeah.
think.
And you may not even know what that is until you see the client and you're like,
Exactly.
oh,
Exactly.
yeah.
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 Exactly. Yeah.
The last point I do want to make in Tesofensine is they do dose it up to uh, at least 1 milligram, possibly even more than that in some of the studies. But the weight loss tends to plateau at 0.5 milligram. So you get to 0.5, you're probably getting everything you're going to get out of it, but you get more side effects when you dose higher. So I would just sort of caution people, if anyone was going to experiment with it, I would definitely be looking at that lower dose. And even the clients that I have had use it, they would start on less than 0.5 milligram.
Hmm.
Okay, what's next?
Was probably going to be the one that I've played around with the most, and actually quite a fair bit, I would say. So this is probably like, handballing it over to me. I think. I don't know. Like maybe you have used it with some clients. I think you might have actually used it with a few.
I've used it with
Uh,
one client and I've used myself, but that's it.
yeah. Okay. So this also would come under the category as a small molecule compound. Okay. So it's not by definition a peptide, and that is 5-amino-1-MQ. Now, the one thing I do want to say, and I do admit, okay, that when you're looking at a lot of the research around 5-amino-1-MQ, it's really going to be in marine models, not marine, okay, not the ocean, okay, marine models, okay, which is just a technical terminology for what, like rodents, okay, mice, hamsters, rats, okay. So a lot of people might say, well, that's it's not great, okay, that they don't have a lot, human subjects and human trials. But I think, some of those marine models, I think they're pretty, the information that they're finding is pretty, it's pretty interesting once again. Yeah. Okay. So now I do want to say that to understand where you're getting a lot of the benefits with 5-amino-1-MQ, you really need to understand what? You really need to understand a thing called NNMT. Okay. And so I would advise people, rather than just going away and trying to look at what research they can find
Yeah.
directly around 5-amino-1-MQ, go and look at the research around inhibition of
Yes.
nicotinamide and methyltransferase. Would you agree with me around
Yeah,
that?
well,
Okay.
it's often what you'll even find in those studies is it'll be called an what is it? NNMT inhibitor.
NNMT inhibitor. Okay.
Yeah. And they may
Uh,
even use 5-amino-1-MQ, but the
yeah.
study title will just be NNMT inhibitor.
Or inhibition of it. Yeah, okay, like a lot of the time. And so we've spoken about this too with like other peptides, okay, where people are sort of like looking up something and go, well, look, there's not really much data or research around that, okay. But if you actually go away and you look at inhibition, okay, or nicotinamide and methyltransferase, okay, inhibition or inhibitor, that's where you're actually going to find a lot of the data. Yeah, okay. And so this is where ultimately you're getting all the benefits. Okay, so I think just briefly, I think if I just give people a bit of an overview, okay, what is this enzyme? So it's an enzyme. That's what it is. Okay. Now, if we look at it around like body composition, but I don't only want to look at it from the body composition perspective, even though I guess this is a body composition sort of like leftovers podcast. Okay, but what we're saying is, well, if we're just going for weight loss and body composition, this would not be the molecule that I would go for.
Your
Okay.
first choice. Yeah.
But it's all the other benefits that you get around an inhibition of like NNMT that you need to consider. Yeah. So that's why I want to talk about, talk about this in a little bit more depth outside of just just the body composition solely. Okay. But if we initially look at it from a body composition perspective, yeah, okay, so nicotinamide N-methyltransferase, okay, so that's an enzyme, and basically that can slow down the process at which the body metabolizes fat cells. And so when they've done research around this, when they've done treatment with once again, in the research, comes out as a potent NNMT inhibitor. From what I can understand, 5-amino-1-MQ is one of the most potent NNMT inhibitors, from what I can understand. Okay, now they had like diet-induced obese mice. Okay, and then when they did the inhibition of the NNMT, obviously with the 5-amino-1-MQ, okay, that actually helped with a significant reduction in things like white adipose mass, decreased like adipocyte size, okay, and even things like body weight. So for people who don't know what adipose mass is or adipocyte size, okay, we're talking about like fat cells. That's what we're talking about. Yeah, okay. So so we can
reduction in like liver fat as well, wasn't there, or organ fat?
yeah.
Like
Well,
that.
so this is the thing. Yeah, okay. So so if you look at NNMT, okay, it's like well, I don't know if I like this terminology, okay, but like sort of like a metabolic enzyme, okay. And so what it's really like it's regulating things like cellular energy. So like it doesn't mean we demonize NNMT, yeah, because a bit of a tongue twister there, NNMT, okay, but so we don't demonize it. That makes sense, okay, but it regulates like cellular energy, metabolism, things like gene expression, okay, but
so it's working very differently to the other stuff we've talked about because it's not
yes.
working at an appetite level per se.
Yeah. And I like so the thing with something like NNMT, okay, it actually puts pressure on nicotinamide. So it basically, it's putting more pressure on it, okay. So it's almost like what would be the terminology I would give around it? Okay, like sort of like is consuming, okay, sort of like consuming nicotinamide, okay, to methylate it, basically, okay. And so if like the way to look at it, if you did like an inhibition of the NNMT, then it frees up this precursor. Does that sort of make sense what I'm saying there? Okay, because like if you look at like so we're talking about like NAD plus. Yeah, okay, which for people who don't know, I think a lot of people would have heard of like NAD plus or NAD, okay? So we're talking about nicotinamide, adenine, okay, dinucleotide. That's what it is, okay? And there's basically precursors for NAD plus. Okay, one of them is nicotinamide. Okay, then you got like nicotinamide riboside. It's another one. Okay, doesn't like tryptophan come into that category as well? Okay, or nicotinic acid as well. Yeah, okay, I feel like we might have like ages ago when we were talking about like things like acetaldehyde and all that type of stuff, we might have spoken about some of these precursors for like NAD plus, but that would have been like quite a while ago. Okay, now so why is this important? Okay, now. Have you ever seen like the mice studies? Okay, where now once again I understand some mice studies. Okay, but there was mice studies where they actually showed this was to do with like NAD plus. Okay, they were resistant to weight gain in regards to the benefits of the NAD plus. Yeah. Okay. Now, yes, it was in mice. Okay, so I'm not, but at the same time, I'm not saying it's in the same category as glucagon like peptide 1 receptor agonist. Okay. But you do get all these other benefits, okay? Like it actually did reduce things like nerve damage, okay? It actually did help with things like telomeres, okay? Like longer lifespan, basically, okay? And it also improved and controlled aspects around like blood sugar, okay? There was benefits around like, I think it was to do with like lipid metabolism, okay? So you're getting these types of benefits, okay? And I think there's some pretty good benefits around like improving like mental clarity, Okay, improving things like alertness, concentration, memory. Okay, isn't there some stuff around like NAD plus, like helping with things like chronic fatigue as well? Yeah. Okay, so you are getting like a whole diverse array of benefits. That's my
Mm,
point. Yeah. Okay,
mm.
and so that's I don't know if this like hopefully this is sort of like clear. Okay, what I'm saying here. Okay, is that this is by doing that inhibition of the NNMT, okay, you are getting very multifaceted.
Because of his influence on NAD.
Yeah, correct,
Yeah.
correct. Yeah, okay. I mean, I think they've even shown that like NNMT itself, okay, that can actually be implicated in things like cancers. Okay, I think like neurodegenerative diseases, okay, metabolic diseases. Okay, like a whole heap of whole heap of conditions. Yeah, okay. And there's something else I was going to say around that. Yeah, but I think you get I
Mm,
think you get
mm,
my big point. Yeah, okay. So now you mentioned around the liver, yeah,
mm.
and so I would say if anyone's got like like fatty liver, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, like maybe just a ramp up in things like liver enzymes. The other one would be around like liver fibrosis, okay,
Mhm.
or like liver fibroids, or like basically like scarring in the liver. Okay. Well, what they've actually shown, okay, doing an inhibition of NNMT, okay, it actually showed significant promise around preventing and treating things like liver scarring.
Mm.
And I think there was like preclinical studies, okay, where once again, okay, they did the inhibition. Okay, what it did, it normalized like circulating levels of liver enzymes.
Mhm.
Okay, so that would be like I think it was like ALT, AST. I think I might have mentioned to you like in the past that maybe it might have been a little bit more significant around ALT potentially. But like it was a while ago that I looked at that. Okay, but basically inhibition can actually help to mitigate things like liver injury. That's my point. Yeah.
Mm.
Okay. Um, and they have actually linked, just so people understand, NNMT has been linked. I think this is actually like more recent research, okay, where they actually did link it to like liver disease. They linked it to non-alcoholic liver disease, okay, even things like liver cirrhosis, hepatocellular carcinoma, or hepatocellular disease, okay, which is like liver cancer, basically, okay, and even alcoholic liver disease as well, okay.
Mhm.
So so but once again, okay, I don't want to fully demonize
Sure.
NNMT as well, okay, because I think, I came across like some research, okay, where they might actually exhibit like a beneficial role in the liver, okay, but then a more harmful effect in like adipose tissue. So
Yeah, okay, yeah.
you sort of understand what I'm saying there. It's not like you just want to do like an inhibition of like NNMT like all the time, yeah, okay,
Yeah, yeah, totally, to be
yeah,
probably cyclical. So
yeah,
something
yeah.
like 5-amino-1-MQ, so I've not looked at the research anywhere near as much as you have, but in some of the animal studies I've seen, I think they've used an injectable, no, subcutaneous? Is it it's
I mean, that's
like it
like obviously oral. We know that oral bioavailability, okay, is good when it comes to that. Yeah.
yeah, so there's research on orally using it?
Oh, I believe so. Yeah.
I just haven't
Um,
looked, it's just not something I've spent time looking into.
yeah. It's been a while. It's been a while since I've actually looked at all the research. Yeah. But I'm I'm pretty sure. I don't want to say 100%. Yeah. Okay. Because
Yeah,
it's been
sure.
a while since I've looked at it. Yeah, okay. But obviously, I recommend it orally. Yeah, and if someone for the treatment of someone like obesity, okay, let's say like morbidly obese, okay, you can go up to about 150 milligrams. Okay, when it comes to the 5-amino-1-MQ, now a lot of time I tend to use about anywhere between about 50 to 100 milligrams. Top end for me would be about 100 milligrams. Um, and, look, if you're using that orally, um, you know, a lot of time that can be still, it doesn't always have to be a significant um, time away from like food. Okay, I think you can actually have that relatively like close to food as well. Okay, so yeah, but most of the time I'm sort of recommending between about 50 to 100 milligrams. More than not, probably about 100 milligrams. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, but
And there's studies showing like beneficial changes in the microbiome as well. Yeah.
yes. Okay. And now the stuff that I find really interesting, and once again, this is to do with the inhibition of the NNMT, is just some of the stuff around like cancer as well. I don't
Mm.
can I mention that? I think I can mention it. Okay, but they actually with the 5-amino 1-MQ, okay, they actually show it could effectively inhibit cancer cells that basically proliferate abnormally rapidly. Okay, and that was compared to like other cancer cells. Okay, so I can't remember. There was like I think it was two proteins. I can't remember the name of the proteins. Okay, but basically the 5-amino 1-MQ. Okay, like treatment with that resulted in a decrease in like two proteins that have basically been reported to maintain tumor progression. Yeah, okay, so you are getting these types of benefits as well. Okay. And the other stuff that I find interesting around like inhibition of nicotinamide N-methyltransferase is actually around the muscles. So I don't know. Have you actually seen this research, okay, where they've actually done it in regards to like treating like muscle atrophy?
No, I don't think I have.
Yeah, so they actually showed through lowering like NNMT expression, it might actually help to treat muscle atrophy. Okay, so obviously we're talking about a loss of skeletal muscle mass. Okay,
That's interesting. 'Cause you would think if it's increasing cellular energy use and helping with fat loss, you probably would think that it would exacerbate atrophy. So it's
yeah, but not
interesting
not
that it's
yeah
actually.
yeah you would definitely think that. Okay, but not and obviously not in the literature and the research that I've looked at. Yeah, okay, they looked at growth following injury. Yeah, okay, so they actually showed that once again the inhibition of the nicotinamide N-methyltransferase. Okay, it was actually shown to enhance like the functional contractile units of skeletal muscle regeneration, okay, and even like growth following injury, okay. So there was actually improvements in like strength, okay, in the injured muscle, which I find really interesting, okay. So it's sort of like, yeah. So it's like ticking a box from that perspective, okay.
Mm.
And there was also the benefits around like type 2 diabetes. Okay, they actually showed that doing I think when they did like a knockdown. Okay, so when they did like a NNMT knockdown, it was actually shown to significantly increase like things like energy expenditure. So it's got benefits around like sort of like ATP, adenosine triphosphate, electron transport chain, and just like energy. Okay. And there was another mechanism. Oh, will come to me. Yeah, okay. But I guess my big point is, okay, where you're getting all these benefits, okay, is to do with the stuff that I was talking about with things like the NAD plus,
Mm.
okay, and
Mm.
obviously the inhibition, okay, of the NNMT. Yeah, okay.
Mm.
I guess.
I looked up just now some of the studies on weight loss in mice to see if they did it orally or sub-Q. The studies use sub-Q, but there is a study that came up where they tested oral bioavailability again in mice, but the
Yeah,
oral
yeah,
bioavailability
yeah,
was high.
yeah, yeah. I knew there was something, okay, and when it came to the oral
Mm.
application, but I just it was, as I said, it's been a while since I actually looked at a lot of those studies. So
Mm.
um,
Now, 5-amino-1-MQ, it's a relatively new substance as far as studies go. Like
yeah,
most of the studies, I think all the studies that I've seen, they would have been 2020 onwards, right? Like I think some of the ones you've mentioned there, they were in the last couple of years. So I don't know, it may well be the kind of thing we might see human research come out on. I don't know. Maybe it'll be thrown by the wayside again, like other things because of GLP-1s, but it is relatively early days in the studies I've seen.
But obviously, my big point would be if I've got a client, okay, where they do actually have like a ramp up in the liver enzymes, okay, in particular like the AST and the ALT, maybe some of those considerations around, um, you know, benefits around like treating like muscle atrophy, which obviously that's going to apply to like, sarcopenia, which is like muscle wastage. Yeah. And even like, growth following injury and some of like these types of benefits. Okay. If I've got a, individual or a client, okay, that really they're just ticking a lot of those boxes. I think like 5-amino 1-MQ is relatively interesting from that
Yes.
perspective. Yeah,
Mm, mm.
yeah. But once again, it's not me saying, okay, that you're going to be getting those types
The
of
same type of fat loss.
body fat percentage loss and weight loss and body mass index loss. Okay, as what we were talking about with the glucagon like peptide 1 receptor agonists. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I think we have one more to cover,
Well,
which
actually, I did say to you, I couldn't remember if I fully went into this one. Okay, like I think I might have briefly mentioned it. And it's sort of like relatively new on the radar. So I'm definitely not saying that this is definitive around the information that I'm communicating here, okay, because it is relatively new. But from my perspective, it could be interesting, like in the future. And so that's the PYY peptide, which is basically 36 amino acids. So they call it a
oh, this is
peptide.
a peptide. Yeah, so we are talking about a peptide in this episode.
Yeah. Well, they call it a peptide, but does it really? It might actually come under the category of like a hormone. Yeah. But
And if
basically,
it's 30, what's the limit for how many amino acids in a peptide?
well, I mean, if you just go on the basic things, you got polypeptides, which are anywhere between 50 to 100 plus. Yeah. Okay. And then you got peptides is anywhere between 2 to 50.
2 to
So
50. Okay, so if
if
it's
we're looking,
36, then that
if,
would still constitute.
yeah,
Okay.
it's sort of maybe it's sort of like hormones, sort of like peptides. There's a bit of like maybe it's a combination. But by definition, okay, you would say it's a peptide. Okay, but basically the PYY peptide is so when it comes to the highest production, expression, secretion. I've mentioned this before. Okay, it actually comes from like cells. Don't worry, I'm not going to talk it. I'm not going to turn it into a Panacel.
Well, we have one of those. People can go back and listen to our Panacel episode.
A Panacel conversation. Okay, but the PYY peptide, it basically controls aspects around satiety. It actually does control aspects around the cephalic phase of digestion. Okay, so for people who don't know what that is, okay, it's like when you see food, you start the digestive process. Okay, and the other thing with the PYY peptide, it's selectively antifungal. So what I mean by that, okay, you've got the commensal forms of things like Candida albicans, other Candida strains, which obviously have benefits around like nutrient assimilation, nutrient absorption, okay, and even aspects around like your immune system, okay. And what happens, the commensal forms of Candida albicans, other Candida strains, turn into the more virulent forms where now they're being linked to things like, fatty liver, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, systemic disease like cancer and so forth. Okay, now the role of the PYY peptide, this is why it's selectively antifungal. Okay, it actually stops the commensal forms from turning into their more virulent forms where now they're problematic. Okay, so that is a modulation process. Okay, and so it basically helps to, it actually helps with the fungal microbiome. Basically, it helps to modulate and regulate that. Okay, so potentially, okay, you're getting these other benefits on top of that. Okay, but they basically showed that mice that were lacking the PYY peptide, they were more prone to obesity and weight gain.
Well, there's human research in that as well. I don't know if you've seen that, where obese participants had lower levels of PYY.
Yes. Okay. And then they're like, this was actually maybe I mentioned this in the last podcast. Can't remember. Okay, but they were sort of like analyzing things via like a food diary. Actually, yeah. Okay. So they did like a infusion with the PYY peptide. Okay, so it was like and then they monitored things like 12 hours post infusion with the PYY peptide. Okay, and there was a significant inhibition of like food intake in both the obese but also lean people as well. Okay, they did that through, so maybe it could have been like better mechanisms. Okay, but they did that through analyzing like food diaries. Okay,
Well, there was another study on that where they combined it with a GLP-1. Have you seen that?
uh,
It
I
was it
think
was
I might have
actually
seen
with
that. Yeah, okay,
GLP-1.
you've rejigged my memory there. Okay, but like I'm pretty sure I have seen that. But you're going to have to.
I'm pretty
Um,
sure it was actually GLP-1, not even receptor agonist, but
uh,
actually GLP-1. It was an old
okay.
study, and they combined the PYY. I guess it would have been an infusion as well, and I think it was like all you can eat. It was like I think it was like a buffet, and they had one group just used the PYY peptide, one group used the GLP-1, and one group used the combination. And the PYY peptide enhanced the efficacy of the GLP-1, and it had the greatest impact on reducing intake. I forget by how much. It was quite a lot. It was like a third reduction or something like that. So that was at least, actually measured, I think, in either in caloric intake or in total like food mass, something like that. But again, that's a human study, and so
Mm.
there's data showing significant reduction in intake.
I mean, a lot of them are my studies. Yeah, like so. Once again, like your marine, yeah, okay, like the marine model. But I don't know if you mentioned this, okay, but they actually had mice that had increased circulating like PYY peptide, okay, and they were resistant to diet-induced obesity, basically. Yeah, okay,
Mm,
and then they actually had the mice that were lacking the PYY peptide. They had this insatiable hunger. Yeah, okay,
mm,
and then they also they did research where they did like, I can't remember the amount, okay, but they almost did like a chronic administration of the PYY peptide, okay. That was in like obese mice, okay, and it reduced like excess like fat tissue within the
mhm,
mice, okay. The other thing is just around like some of the potential benefits around like pancreatic function as well, okay, because they've actually shown that the PYY peptide could play like a fundamental role in like sort of endocrine pancreatic function. Okay, there's some stuff around that as well. So, like obviously, I'm not saying that this for people to go out and just start trying the PYY peptide. That might be pretty hard to actually find that, to be honest. Yeah, okay.
well, have you ever used it with any clients?
No.
No, and is it even available? I've never used
Well,
it.
that's it. I haven't even like. I've obviously looked at a lot of the research because, as you know, I've done so much research on like cells. Okay, of course, within that, I've done a fair bit of research around the PYY peptide. Okay, because once again, the highest production, expression, secretion of the PYY peptide comes from cells. Yeah. Okay.
Mm.
So, so to answer your question, I don't know if it's actually available. Okay, but it's sort of like I do like a lot of the research and the data, and maybe a little bit further down the line, especially due to some of these other benefits around like selectively antifungal and all that type of stuff, yeah, and the benefits around like the gut. Yeah, it could be yeah. Once again, I've probably mentioned this many times. Okay, it could be relatively interesting. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think it sounds interesting. I just don't know because, again, I might be wrong here. I feel like there was an intranasal study. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, once again, you've got me like thinking. I think I've seen that research. Yeah, but I think you're going to have to,
I might be wrong. My
rejig.
recollection was there was an intranasal study that didn't find benefit. I don't remember if that was
Okay.
animals or humans or what. But my understanding was it worked better injected. But again, this is your wheelhouse. I haven't looked at much research on this.
I know they had a group. Okay, maybe you mentioned this study? Okay, where they had there was an obese group. Okay, where they received like a saline, and then they had obviously a group. Okay, where they received the PYY peptide. Okay, and they obviously the group that received the saline. Okay, they actually consumed more calories. Okay, so it was like reduced like 24-hour
Mm.
calorie intake. Okay,
Mm. I think
um,
there's a number of those studies actually. Like
mhm.
there's definitely a few human studies on this. But yeah, as far as I know, the ones that showed benefit were injections. Um,
Yes, yes, definitely. It's definitely around the injections, and probably at the moment, it's going to be pretty hard to get the PYY peptide. Okay.
Mm.
I know a lot of people are going to go, well, why are you mentioning it? I'm just sort of saying, like, maybe just watch this space when it comes to
Yeah,
that. Okay.
because it does sound very interesting.
Yeah, I think
I
so.
think that would be, especially if you could, combine it with other things and reduce, because the fact that you said, "Hey, it could have benefit there potentially around pancreatic function." Well, pancreas is one of the potential concerns, maybe around GLP-1s.
Well, yeah, well, and when you're saying that sort of like that combination where they're using the PYY peptide, but they were using with glucon like peptide 1, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
That's sort of, I mean, it's hard because of how much research you're going to find
yeah.
around that outside of what you just mentioned. Okay, well, there's no other research around it, probably. Okay, so
Probably not, yeah, but again, the
um,
fact that obese people have lower levels of PYY as well,
yeah.
lower endogenous production, you would think, well, if someone needs GLP-1 and they're obese, odds are they've probably got low levels of PYY.
Well, I just think
Then
there's benefits around the gut. Yeah, okay, and
yeah, yeah,
sort of
yeah,
like
exactly.
antifungal benefits. Like the combination starts to get really interesting with those two. Yeah.
Well, you know what? I think that's probably the next evolution is, again, I don't think we can get away from the fact that GLP-1s really they're here for good. But I think the next revolution is what enhances GLP-1s? What can you use to either mitigate some of the downsides or even enhance some of the positives? And, I was talking to you before we hit record about Akkermansia and some research showing that Akkermansia probiotic combined with GLP-1s actually significantly enhance the efficacy of the GLP-1. But this could be another example of something else you could add to the GLP-1 receptor agonist and potentially have a greater efficacy again. So I think that would be really interesting in a few years' time where some of these other compounds are more easily available and to find out, hey, you can use half the dose of a GLP-1 and you can get, twice results and higher chance of maintaining that fat loss, a higher chance of muscle preservation or, less
Well,
gut downsides or whatever it might be by adding in some of these compounds.
yeah, and even like if people you know, go back, okay, to a lot of the peptide podcast episodes that we've already released, okay, then just to expand on what you've just mentioned there, okay, well, if you look at something like like thymosin beta 4, okay, so you
Mm,
you 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 were just mentioning around like muscle preservation, yeah, okay,
mm,
now. And also, we want a compound, okay, that's also going to give significant benefits around the gut lining. Okay, well, we obviously know, and we've spoken about this already, that thymosin beta 4, when they did, because obviously that's the most frequent thymosin in the body, okay, and you find in like, it's 43 amino acids, so you find in like platelets, white blood cells, okay, but it's also abundant within the intestinal epithelium when they did a thing called knockout in mice, where they knocked out the thymosin beta 4 out of the intestinal epithelium. It impeded on cell cycling, cell proliferation, which is like an autophagy process within the gut lining. Okay, so you're getting those benefits, but just also around the potential of things like muscle atrophy, and so I mentioned to you there was actually like research, okay, where they looked at a thing called dystrophin. Okay, so dystrophin, okay, is like a protein, okay, that stabilizes like muscle cell membranes. Okay, so basically, without the muscle fibers, okay, they basically become easily damaged. Okay, like during things like contractions. Okay, so leading to like muscle wasting and weakness and muscle dystrophy, like so, or muscular dystrophy conditions potentially. Okay, so and so what they looked at, this is within mice. Okay, so they had like exercise dystrophin deficient mice. Okay, then they did chronic administration of like TB4. Okay, that increased the number of like regenerating fibers in skeletal muscle. Okay, so they actually were looking at this around the treatment of skeletal muscle diseases. Okay, like muscular dystrophy and those types of conditions. Okay, so I like what you're saying there. Okay, like there's other peptides. Okay, that you could be pairing it with to sort of like cover the bases,
mm.
okay, of once again around like the gut, or whether it's around things like muscle atrophy and yeah, like these types of issues.
Mm, mm. Yeah, I think that's really the next. next level is how do we layer some of this stuff together? And, I think that's sort of why we started this series on peptides anyway, was because coaches and naturopaths and people in the functional health space, they've got so many tools at their disposal. That's their wheelhouse, has been developing protocols that hopefully work, using different supplements, using different herbals and other interventions. And now that we've got peptides, which are not a replacement tool, but a whole additional series of tools, now we've got an opportunity to actually layer peptides in with everything else. And so I think that's where there's a lot of magic that's yet to happen, because the world's been captivated by this peptide craze and people are turning to peptides, but they're not really looking at these other things that we've had available to us all along. And
Mm.
so they're just using GLP-1s, or they're just using BPC, or they're just using TB500 or whatever. And the reality is, and hopefully people will work this out soon enough, is these things are awesome. But if you combine them with some of these other tools we've got, I mean, that's where 1+1 = 5. You can really see the needle move if you actually use all the tools at your disposal, and not just supplements and not just peptides, but actually use everything we've got.
Mm. And also just a reminder that there actually were some other compounds. And when we spoke about like growth hormone releasing peptides, okay, there was obviously like testosterone, which is, we've already broken that down, okay, in that podcast episode, okay. But remember, just for people's reference, okay, that testosterone is another compound, okay, that can actually improve like body composition and lean body mass, okay, and obviously the benefits around like IGF-1, okay, like growth factors. It's pretty, it can be pretty effective in increasing like skeletal muscle area and density, and but obviously we've already spoken about that in another podcast. But I just want to mention, okay, there are some, that's another compound, okay, that once again, okay, if the individual or the person that you're dealing with, okay, they have certain issues where something like testosterone is covering a lot of those bases, okay, that can be another potential peptide or compound, okay, that you may utilize.
Mm, mm. So I think they were all the ones I had to cover on my list, the quick list that we put together 1 minute before starting. Was there anything else you wanted to
No,
mention?
I think I think they were all the leftovers. Yeah, okay. I'm pretty sure. I'm sure there's probably some other peptides, okay, where you might look at the data and there can be some there could be some minor benefits there, okay. But I think we're talking about, pretty low percentages. Yeah. So, so it's
And
just
we
pretty,
wanted to talk about stuff that we've actually researched or we've used,
yeah.
or we've got clients that have used. We don't want to just be out here talking about stuff we've got no experience with and no knowledge on. There's plenty of other people taking up that space.
Oh, I like it. I like it. I don't mind that dig.
I shouldn't have had a coffee too late, getting a little bit sassy. Okay, I think that's all we've got. I mean, unfortunately, we're going to have to think of new topics now, because that was nice and easy for us for the last however many episodes. So if there is stuff you guys are interested in us covering, shoot us a message, or, when I do Q&As, let me know in the Q&A what topics you'd like us to cover.
Well, you might have to put the feelers out. So
yeah, we're going to be scratching our head now. Next time we come to do an episode, we won't know what to do.
Unless you think of another topic in regards to like peptides, which that's a possibility as well.
We might just default back to just talking more about peptides. Peptides round 2. No, hopefully not. Hopefully we can think of something. Okay, I think that is it. Thank you guys for listening to our peptide series. It's been a blast. If you do have anything you want us to cover, let us know. Otherwise, we'll be back soon with a new topic. I don't know what it'll be.